Dear Lady Bracknell, I used to be the cleaner for your sister and her husband Ernest. 28 years ago, I left your sister's house with a pram that contained a baby of the male sex who was named after his father. I never returned. I had also with me a somewhat old handbag in which I deposited the baby and left near a railway station. The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old gentleman of a very charitable and kindly disposition, found the baby and gave him the name of Worthing because he happened to have a first-class ticket for Worthing in his pocket at the time. Mr. Thomas Cardew made Mr. Worthing, in his will, guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew, and they both lived together in the country. In order for Jack to be able to get up to town, he pretends to have a younger brother by the name of Ernest, who gets into the most dreadful scrapes with his best friend, your nephew, Mr. Algernon Moncrief. I do hope that this letter will shed a light on what happened to your sister's baby, Mr. Ernest Moncrief. Yours sincerely, Miss Letitia Prism.
Charming day it's been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray, don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain they mean something else.
Gwendolen, ever since I've met you, I've admired you more than any other girl I've ever met since I met you.
I'm quite well aware of the fact. The moment Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Ernest, I knew I was destined to love you.
I think there are some other much nicer names. Jack, for instance, is a charming name.
No. There is very little music to the name Jack, if any at all. I have known several Jacks, and all of them, without exception, were more than usually plain. The only really safe name is Ernest.
Gwendolen, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely you know that I love you.
But you haven't proposed to me.
May I propose to you now?
Yes, Mr. Worthing. What have you got to say to me?
Gwendolen, will you marry me?
Of course I will. I'm afraid you have very little experience in how to propose.
Mr. Worthing! Rise, sir.
I'm engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mother.
Pardon me, you're not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged, I will inform you of the fact.
Mother!
Outside, Gwendolen. You will be hearing from me, Mr. Worthing.
Have you told Gwendolen the truth about you being Ernest in the town and Jack in the country?
Oh, by the end of the week I shall have got rid of Ernest. I'll say he died in Paris.
But I thought you said that Miss Cardew was a little too much interested in your poor brother Ernest. Won't she feel his loss a great deal?
Cecily is not a silly romantic girl.
I should rather like to see Cecily.
I would take great care that you never do. She's excessively pretty and she's only just 18.
And have you told Gwendolen that you have an excessively pretty ward who is only just 18? Gwendolen!
Algie, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing. Ernest, from the expression on my mother's face, I fear we shall never be married.
Dear Gwendolen.
What is your address in the country?
Brook Farm House, Hertfordshire.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
Why are you here? Uncle Jack won't be back until Monday afternoon.
Oh, that is a great disappointment.
You better stay until Uncle Jack arrives. Uncle Jack, I'm so pleased to see you. Who do you think is in the sitting room? Your brother.
I haven't got a brother.
Brother Jack! I've come all the way down from town to tell you I'm terribly sorry for all the trouble I've caused you.
Uncle Jack, do be nice.
Of course, I admit all the faults were on my side.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake his hand, I will never forgive you. Never, never, never. My little task of reconciliation is over. I'm very happy.
I'm afraid I can't stay more than a week.
I'm afraid you can't stay more than a day.
Cecily is such a little darling.
I won't have you talk about Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them.
I'm afraid this trip hasn't been a great success for you.
Cecily, I hope you shall not be offended if I state quite openly and frankly that you seem to me to be the personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Cecily, ever since I first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I do not think that you should say that you love me wildly, passionately, hopelessly, devotedly. Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed.
I don't care what Jack thinks. I don't care what anyone else in the world thinks. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
Oh, you silly boy, of course. Why, we have been engaged for the past 4 months.
How did we become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to me that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest. It has always been a girlish dream of mine to be in love with a man named Ernest.
But, my dear child, you don't mean to say that you couldn't love me if I had another name? Algernon, for instance? You, Cecily, you could love me if my name was Algie, couldn't you?
I might respect you, but I fear I shall not be able to give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, would you excuse me? I'll be back in no time.
Miss Gwendolyn Fairfax, here to see Mr. Worthing.
Cecily Cardew, I'm Mr. Worthing's ward.
He never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How very secretive of him. I cannot help expressing a wish you were well. Just a little older than you appear to be, and not so alluring in appearance. Ernest has a very upright nature. He's the very soul of truth and honour. But even men of the noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the influences of the physical charms of others.
I beg your pardon. Did you say Ernest?
Yes.
Oh, but it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother. In fact, Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
My darling Cecily, I fear there must be some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me.
I am afraid you must be under some misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
It's certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. I am sorry, dear Cecily, but I do have the prior claim.
How dare you? There is no time for wearing the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I am glad to say that I have never seen a spade. It is obvious that our social spheres have been widely different. The country always bores me to death.
May I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you.
Sugar?
No, thank you. Sugar isn't fashionable anymore.
Cake? Or bread and butter?
Oh, bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen in the best houses nowadays. You have filled my tea with heaps of sugar, and though I distinctly asked for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the sweetness of my nature, but I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting Ernest, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
Ernest,
Gwendolyn.
may I ask you, are you engaged to this young lady?
No, of course not.
I'm afraid there has been some misunderstanding, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman whose arm is around your waist is my guardian, Mr. Jack Worthing.
Jack? Oh.
Oh, here is Ernest. May I ask, are you engaged to this young woman?
Gwendolyn? Of course not. What could have put such an idea in your pretty little head?
I knew there must have been some slight error, Miss Cardew, for the gentleman who is now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief? Oh. Are you called Algernon?
Is your name really Jack?
I cannot deny it.
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked. But my name is certainly Jack.
A gross deception has been practiced on the both of us.
Mr. Worthing, we are both engaged to your brother Ernest, so it is a matter of some importance to us to know where your brother Ernest is.
I have no brother. I have never had a brother, and I have not the smallest intention of ever having one in the future.
No brother at all.
No.
I'm afraid, dear Cecily, it's quite clear that neither one of us is engaged to be married to anyone. which of us should tell them.
Can we not both speak at the same time?
Your Christian names are still an issue.
Is that all? But I am going to be christened this afternoon.
There shall be no christenings today. Mr. Worthing, I have with me a letter I believe you should read.
I'm back. Ernest. Yours sincerely, Miss Letitia Prism. I always told you, Gwendolyn, that my name was Ernest, didn't I? Well, it is. It naturally is Ernest after all.
You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and Algernon's elder brother.
What? I have a brother. I always knew I had a brother.
My nephew, you seem to be showing signs of triviality.
On the contrary, Aunt Augusta, I've now, for the first time in my life, realised the vital importance of being earnest.